Moments before his hearing, he made his final plea. A document changed everything. Ethan Johnson, just 8 years old, took a deep breath before pushing open the heavy wooden doors of the Boston family court, clutching a yellowed envelope that trembled in his small hands. The hearing that would decide his fate had already been underway for over 2 hours, and everyone in the room turned in surprise when they saw the blonde boy in a brown sweater walking determinedly down the center aisle. Grandpa Walter Miller, 68 years old and wearing prescription glasses, felt his heart race as he recognized the envelope his grandson was holding. It was the same one he had kept hidden for years in the old safe at his home in Brookline, believing those papers would never see the light of day. The gray-haired man tried to stand from his chair, but his legs shook so much he had to lean on the table for support. "Your Honor, I request permission to speak," Ethan said with a steady voice despite the clear nervousness in his light brown eyes. Dr. Richard Parker, a 45-year-old businessman who owned a chain of supermarkets in the greater Boston area, had spent months trying to prove he was the boy's biological father. Dressed in an impeccable navy blue suit, he had presented DNA tests and documents that seemed to confirm his paternity, demanding custody of Ethan based on his superior financial status. "Your Honor, this boy should not be here," protested the businessman's lawyer, a tall man around 50. "He should be in school, not interfering in complex legal matters." Dr. Andrew Thompson, Grandpa Walter's defense attorney, remained silent as he watched the scene. The 42-year-old man, also dressed in a suit, seemed to know the boy well, though officially he was only the grandfather's legal representative. Something in his eyes revealed a deeper connection, a tenderness that went beyond a professional relationship. Judge Michael Roberts, a seasoned 55-year-old magistrate who had presided over hundreds of custody cases, motioned for Ethan to come forward. The room fell completely silent, except for the sound of the boy's small footsteps echoing on the cold marble floor. "My name is Ethan Johnson Miller, and I came here because I found out something very important," the boy said, looking directly at the judge. "That man over there," he pointed at Richard, "isn't my real father." The statement sent murmurs through the room. Grandpa Walter closed his eyes, knowing the secrets he had tried to protect were about to come to light. He had raised Ethan since the boy was a baby. After his daughter Melissa had left under circumstances he had never fully explained to his grandson. "Ethan, sweetheart, go home," Grandpa Walter pleaded, his voice breaking. "Grandpa will handle this, don't worry." "No, Grandpa. I've seen you crying in the kitchen every night," Ethan replied with a maturity far beyond his years. "I know you're hurting, and I don't want to go with that man." Dr. Andrew Thompson felt his chest tighten at those words. There was something in the boy's determination that reminded him deeply of his sister Melissa, Ethan's mother, who had left when the boy was just 2 months old. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Richard Parker abruptly stood up, clearly irritated by the interruption. The businessman had invested significant time and money trying to gain custody of Ethan, especially after learning about a substantial inheritance the boy would receive when he turned 18. "Your Honor, this is unacceptable," Richard protested. "A child cannot make decisions about his own custody. I have all the necessary documents proving my paternity." "And I have a document that proves you're lying," Ethan retorted, carefully pulling papers from the envelope. The first document Ethan showed was his original birth certificate, very different from the copy in the court records. The father's name was blank with a handwritten note stating paternity would later be established through a DNA test. "Where did you get this?" asked the judge, examining the document closely. "From Grandpa Walter's safe. The password was my great-grandparents' wedding date, June 15th, 1954, Ethan explained. Grandpa always told that story, how my great-grandfather waited 3 years to marry my great-grandmother because he needed to save money for the celebration. Grandpa Walter Miller couldn't hold back his tears when he realized his grandson had paid such close attention to every detail of the family stories he told at bedtime. All these years, he had believed he was raising the boy alone, never imagining Ethan had absorbed every word with such devotion. There's more, Ethan continued, pulling a letter from the envelope. This is a letter my mother wrote before she left. It explains everything. Dr. Andrew Thompson instinctively stood up but tried to hide his reaction. He knew exactly what was in that letter. He had helped his sister write it years ago when she was desperate and out of options. The letter, written on plain paper in Melissa's delicate handwriting, began, "Dad, I know I'll never be forgiven for what I'm doing, but you need to understand I have no choice. The man who got me pregnant is married and abandoned me when he found out about the baby. He even offered me money to disappear, but I want nothing from him." The silence in the room was deafening as the judge read the letter aloud in a low voice. Ethan waited patiently, as if he knew exactly the impact those words would have. The letter goes on to say that Ethan's real father is Robert Wilson, who works at a construction company in Cambridge, Ethan added. "Not you, Dr. Richard Parker." Richard began sweating visibly, loosening his tie. His eyes searched desperately for an escape, but he was trapped by the lies he had built over months. This could be forged," Richard stammered. "Anyone could write a letter and claim it's old." "You're right," Ethan agreed, surprising everyone. "That's why I brought more proof." The boy then pulled out a series of old photographs from the envelope, showing Melissa with a man who clearly wasn't Richard Parker. The photos had dates printed on the back, all from before Ethan's birth. "This is Robert Wilson," Ethan said, pointing to the photos. "I found him on my Uncle Andrew's Facebook. They were friends." All eyes turned to Dr. Andrew Thompson, who had managed to keep his family connection secret to avoid compromising the case legally. The lawyer took a deep breath, knowing the time had come to reveal the truth. "It's true," Andrew admitted, his voice emotional. "I'm Ethan's uncle. Melissa was my younger sister." The revelation caused another uproar in the room. The judge called for order, while trying to process all the unexpected information. "Dr. Andrew, you should have disclosed this relationship from the start," the judge said sternly. "I know, Your Honor, and I apologize for the omission, but I promised my sister I'd take care of Ethan, and the only way to do that legally was by representing my father," Andrew explained, looking affectionately at his nephew. Ethan ran to Andrew and held his hand as if to comfort him. The simple gesture moved even the most experienced court staff, who rarely let themselves be affected by the cases they witnessed. "Uncle Andrew, I always knew," said Ethan with a shy smile. "You look at me the same way Grandpa does, with so much love. And you always remember to bring strawberry candy when you visit, which is my favorite treat." The seemingly simple observation revealed Ethan's deep perceptiveness. He had noticed details the adults believed had gone unnoticed. Richard Parker realized his deception was being completely exposed, but made one last desperate attempt. "Even if I'm not the biological father, I can offer this child a better life," he argued. "I have financial means. I can pay for the best schools, the best doctors. What can a retired old man offer in comparison?" The cruel question struck Grandpa Walter hard, making him lower his head in shame over his modest financial situation. The man had sacrificed so much over the years to raise his grandson, even selling personal belongings to cover medical bills when Ethan had fallen seriously ill at age 5. "I can answer that," Ethan said, with a determination that surprised everyone. "Grandpa gives me so much love. When I had pneumonia and had to stay in the hospital, he slept in the chair beside me for 10 days. He sold his old car to pay for the medicine the insurance didn't cover." The revelation about Grandpa Walter's sacrifice deeply moved everyone present. Even Richard's lawyer seemed embarrassed by the situation. "Grandpa reads to me every night," Ethan continued. "He tells me stories about our family, helps me with homework, and always asks how my day at school was. You don't even know my favorite subject." Richard tried to guess, but clearly had no idea. Ethan smiled sadly, proving his point. "It's history, because Grandpa tells the most amazing stories about our ancestors. And I also like math, because Uncle Andrew teaches me tricks to calculate faster." The judge watched the family dynamic unfolding before him closely. It was clear Ethan had been raised with immense love and care, despite the family's financial limitations. "Ethan, you mentioned you had more documents. Can you show them?" the judge asked gently. The boy nodded and pulled the last paper from the envelope. It was an adoption document dated 8 years prior, which had never been finalized due to bureaucratic issues at the time. "This is the paper my mom signed before she left," Ethan explained. "She asked Grandpa to adopt me officially, but they said they needed more documents and other complicated things." The document was properly signed by Melissa, with 2 witnesses and notarization. Though it held no legal weight since it hadn't been processed correctly back then, it clearly showed Melissa's intention to leave her son in her father's care. "There's something else I need to say," Ethan said, taking a deep breath. "I know where my mom is." The silence that followed was absolute. Grandpa Walter paled while Andrew gripped the edge of the table tightly. "She didn't leave by choice," Ethan continued, his voice trembling. "She had complications during childbirth and she never made it home." The delicate way Ethan expressed his mother's loss showed he had finally understood the truth his grandfather had tried to shield him from all these years. Grandpa Walter had invented the story that Melissa had traveled to spare his grandson the pain of knowing he was an orphan. "Grandpa, I'm not mad at you for not telling me," Ethan said, walking over and hugging him. "I understand it was to protect me, but now I'm grown up and I can know the truth." Grandpa Walter hugged his grandson tightly, crying openly for the first time in years. All those nights he had wept alone in the kitchen, thinking Ethan didn't know, were washed away by that sincere, forgiving embrace. Dr. Andrew Thompson was also deeply moved by his nephew's maturity. He had promised his sister in the hospital, moments before she passed, that he would always help take care of Ethan whenever needed. "And there's one more important thing," Ethan said, turning back to the judge. "I found out why Mr. Richard wants me so badly." This time it was Richard who turned completely pale. The businessman nervously glanced at his lawyer, who also seemed unaware of what Ethan was talking about. "My great-grandmother, Mary Helen, left me some land in the countryside when I turned 18, Ethan explained. "It's many acres, and Uncle Andrew told me it's worth a lot of money. Mr. Richard found out, and that's why he lied about being my father." The accusation exploded like a bomb in the courtroom. Richard tried to deny it, but Ethan had already prepared his final proof. "I recorded a conversation between him and his lawyer in the courthouse parking lot," Ethan said, pulling out a small recorder he had hidden in his pocket. The old device, which had once belonged to Grandpa Walter, contained a clear recording of Richard discussing with his lawyer how to access Ethan's inheritance as soon as he got custody. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. The judge ordered the recording to be played in the courtroom. Richard's voice was unmistakable as he explained to his lawyer that the plan had always been to gain custody of Ethan just to control the boy's assets until he came of age. This recording was obtained illegally. Richard's lawyer protested, clearly desperate. "Actually, no," Dr. Andrew interjected. "Ethan was in a public space and simply documented a conversation directly involving his own interests. That's completely legal." Richard finally broke down, admitting he had falsified the DNA tests and other documents. He revealed he had hired people to investigate Ethan's life and discovered the inheritance through public records at the county clerk's office. "I never meant to hurt the boy," Richard tried to justify. "I would have taken good care of him, given him an education, comfort." "You were going to use me," Ethan interrupted sadly. "That's not care. That's selfishness." The simplicity and clarity of Ethan's words echoed in the room, touching everyone present. Despite his young age, the boy had developed a deep understanding of true love and false intentions. The judge then asked to speak with Ethan privately, wanting to ensure the boy fully understood the situation and that his decisions weren't being influenced by adults. In the private room, Ethan confirmed he wanted to stay with his grandfather and had uncovered the truth on his own, driven only by love for his family and concern for Grandpa Walter's pain. "I just want my grandpa to stop crying in secret," Ethan told the judge. "He thinks I don't see, but I always notice when he's sad. He and Uncle Andrew are the only family I have." The judge was struck by Ethan's emotional maturity and the clarity of his convictions. It was rare to find a child so young with such sharp insight and determination. Back in the courtroom, the judge delivered his decision. Considering all the evidence presented, especially the document forgery by Richard Parker, Ethan would remain under the custody of Grandpa Walter Miller. Additionally, the judge ruled that Dr. Andrew Thompson be officially recognized as Ethan's secondary guardian, legally formalizing his role in raising his nephew. Richard Parker was warned about the legal consequences of his fraudulent actions and prohibited from having any contact with Ethan or his family. The businessman left the courtroom with his head down, accompanied by his lawyer, who clearly hadn't been informed about his client's questionable methods. The family could finally embrace openly in the courtroom. Grandpa Walter held Ethan tightly, whispering words of gratitude and love. Dr. Andrew joined the hug, moved to finally publicly assume his role as uncle. "Now we don't have to keep secrets anymore," Ethan said, looking at the two most important men in his life. "Never again," Grandpa Walter promised with tears of joy. "From today on, we'll talk about everything, including your mother." Dr. Andrew promised to have dinner with them at least twice a week and help Ethan with his studies. He also revealed he had kept some mementos of his sister Melissa to give to his nephew when the time was right. In the days following the trial, the family's life changed significantly for the better. Grandpa Walter felt much lighter after freeing himself from the burden of secrets he'd carried for years. He began telling Ethan stories about Melissa, sharing precious memories he'd kept to himself. Ethan learned he had a brave and determined mother who had worked as a preschool teacher and loved to draw. Dr. Andrew brought home a box of drawings Melissa had made during her pregnancy, all depicting dreams and hopes for the child she was expecting. The revelation about the land inheritance also brought a new perspective for the future. Grandpa Walter consulted a specialized lawyer and discovered the land had potential for sustainable development, capable of generating income for the family without needing to sell. Ethan showed interest in learning about sustainable farming and environmental preservation, displaying impressive social awareness for his age. Dr. Andrew promised to help him better understand these concepts as he grew. The Brookline neighborhood community learned about the story through neighbors who had followed the case. Many reached out to offer support and admire Ethan's courage. Mrs. Margaret, their closest neighbor, began helping Grandpa Walter with some household tasks and became a sort of adoptive grandmother to Ethan. She had lost touch with her own grandchildren and found in the family a new reason to feel useful and loved. Ethan's schoolteacher was struck by the maturity the boy showed after the trial. His essays became deeper and more reflective, demonstrating an understanding of family and values that inspired his classmates. Dr. Andrew began reducing his workload to spend more time with the family. He had thrown himself into his career in recent years, partly to cope with the pain of losing his sister, but now found balance between work and personal life. Ethan also showed interest in learning about his uncle's profession, asking thoughtful questions about law and justice. Dr. Andrew felt proud realizing his nephew had a sharp analytical mind and strong sense of fairness. Evenings at Grandpa Walter's house became even more special. Beyond family stories, Ethan began sharing his own dreams and aspirations. He talked about wanting to study hard to honor his mother's memory and take care of his grandfather as he grew older. The bond between grandfather and grandson grew even stronger after all the secrets were revealed. Ethan understood the sacrifice Grandpa Walter had made by giving up a more comfortable life to devote himself fully to raising his grandson. Grandpa Walter, in turn, was amazed by Ethan's intelligence and determination. He began including the boy in important family decisions, recognizing his analytical skills and emotional maturity. Dr. Andrew brought home some old photos of his sister that Ethan had never seen before. The boy was delighted to discover he had the same expressive eyes as his mother and the same shy smile she showed in the pictures. The inheritance of the land became a family project. The three spent weekends visiting the property in the countryside, planning ways to preserve the local nature while developing sustainable activities that could generate income in the future. Ethan showed great interest in the history of the property, which had belonged to the family for 3 generations. He made sure to plant a tree in his mother's honor in a special spot on the farm, creating a living memorial that would grow alongside his memories. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Ethan's case became well known in the area, inspiring other families facing similar situations. Several lawyers reached out to Dr. Andrew to better understand how he had handled the legal aspects of the case, especially the issue of kinship that hadn't been declared initially. The story also caught the attention of social workers handling custody cases. The maturity Ethan showed and the way the family had handled the situation became an example of how true love can overcome bureaucratic and financial challenges. Grandpa Walter decided to write a journal about the entire experience, starting from Ethan's birth all the way to the trial. He wanted to document for his grandson what it had been like to raise a child alone, but also to record all the joyful moments they had shared over the years. Ethan took an interest in his grandfather's project and began helping him, adding his own memories and perspectives on the events he had lived through. The journal became a collaborative effort that strengthened their bond even more. Dr. Andrew decided to specialize in family law, motivated by the personal experience he had gone through. He wanted to help other families facing complex situations involving child custody and family disputes. The courtroom experience also sparked an early interest in justice and children's rights in Ethan. He began participating in school projects related to citizenship and human rights, always under the careful guidance of his uncle and grandfather. The school community was impressed by the leadership Ethan showed after the trial. He became a role model for his peers in situations requiring courage and determination, always willing to help those facing difficulties. The relationship between Grandpa Walter and Dr. Andrew also grew significantly stronger. The two men had grown closer during the legal process, but now they developed a genuine friendship based on their mutual love for Ethan and their shared memories of Melissa. Dr. Andrew took on some of the family's financial responsibilities, not out of legal obligation, but from a sincere desire to contribute. He helped renovate Grandpa Walter's home, making it more comfortable and better suited to Ethan's needs. Ethan accompanied the entire renovation process, learning about financial responsibility and planning. Grandpa Walter and Dr. Andrew made sure to explain every decision, including the boy in discussions about priorities and budget. The family story reached the ears of a local journalist, who asked for permission to write an article about the case. After discussing it as a family, they decided to share their story as a way to inspire other families in similar situations. The article was published in the local newspaper and generated many messages of support and kindness. Several people shared their own experiences with custody disputes and thanked Ethan for having the courage to fight for his family. The positive impact of the story motivated Dr. Andrew to organize school talks about children's rights and the importance of family. Ethan sometimes joined him, sharing his experience to encourage other children to speak up about their feelings and needs. Grandpa Walter began receiving visits from other grandparents, raising grandchildren in similar situations. He became a sort of informal counselor, offering support and guidance based on his own experience. The family's rural property became a gathering place for these families. Ethan suggested organizing picnics and recreational activities so the kids could play while the adults talked and supported one another. The farm activities became regular, creating a strong support network among families facing similar challenges. Ethan showed a natural talent for organizing games and activities that included children of different ages. Dr. Andrew noticed his nephew had potential for working with people and began encouraging him to develop these skills. Ethan became interested in child psychology and education, inspired by the memory of his mother, who had been a teacher. Melissa's memory became a constant positive presence in the family's life. Instead of being a source of sadness, her memories inspired Ethan to be brave, Grandpa Walter to be affectionate, and Dr. Andrew to be dedicated to his family. Ethan started saving his allowance to buy gifts for his grandfather and uncle on special occasions. He wanted to repay all the love he received, even if symbolically, showing gratitude and affection through small gestures. His relationship with school also improved significantly after the trial. The teachers came to better understand Ethan's family situation and admired his maturity and determination. He became a positive example for other students. Ethan's academic performance also improved, not because he wasn't smart before, but because he now felt more secure and loved. The emotional stability from resolving the case reflected in every area of his life. Dr. Andrew began including Ethan in some age-appropriate professional activities, like visits to legal libraries and educational events about children's rights. The boy showed genuine curiosity and asked thoughtful questions. Grandpa Walter was immensely proud to see how Ethan was growing. The boy kept his sweet and caring nature, but had gained a confidence and maturity that would serve him for life. Ethan's story spread beyond the greater Boston area, reaching organizations that work with children's rights. Some of these groups reached out to the family to better understand how such a young child had managed to articulate his legal defense so well. Ethan felt honored by the attention, but always made sure to emphasize that he hadn't done anything special. To him, he was just fighting to stay with the people he loved, something any child would do if they had the courage. Ethan's humility impressed the adults who knew him. Despite all the attention his story had generated, he remained the same affectionate, playful boy he'd always been, focused on his family and his studies. Dr. Andrew decided to create an educational fund for Ethan, ensuring he could attend the best institutions when the time came. The boy was deeply moved by the gesture, but asked that part of the resources be used to help other children in similar situations. Ethan's generosity touched both his grandfather and uncle profoundly. They realized that despite all the hardships he'd faced, the boy had developed a generous heart and genuine concern for others' well-being. The rural property became an even more special place for the family. They spent nearly every weekend there, creating precious memories and strengthening family bonds amid the nature Ethan so cherished. Inspired by his sense of responsibility toward the land he would inherit, Ethan began studying environmental preservation and sustainable agriculture. He wanted to honor great-grandmother Mary Helen's memory by caring for the property she had preserved. Visits to the farm also became opportunities for Ethan to learn practical skills. Grandpa Walter taught him how to plant vegetables, care for small animals, and perform basic maintenance tasks, preparing him to responsibly manage the property in the future. Dr. Andrew brought books on environmental management and sustainable development, adapting the content for Ethan's age. The boy showed genuine interest and asked insightful questions about balancing preservation and development. The family also began hosting visits from college students researching sustainable rural development. Ethan enjoyed joining these conversations, learning about different perspectives and possibilities for the property's future. These discussions sparked his interest in various fields of knowledge. He started reading more about history, geography, biology, and even economics, always guided carefully by his grandfather and uncle. Grandpa Walter was amazed by Ethan's thirst for knowledge. The boy asked questions that made him research and learn alongside him, creating a mutual learning environment that enriched them both. The house's library grew significantly, with age-appropriate books for Ethan, as well as more advanced works he could explore as he matured. Dr. Andrew made sure to select high-quality materials that stimulated his nephew's intellectual growth. Ethan also showed interest in artistic activities, especially drawing, a skill he'd inherited from his mother. Dr. Andrew brought art supplies and books on drawing techniques, encouraging his nephew to explore this form of expression. Over time, Ethan's drawings became more elaborate and expressive. He loved depicting scenes from the farm, family moments, and landscapes from the area where he lived, creating a visual record of his experiences and memories. Grandpa Walter suggested Ethan keep an album of his drawings, organized chronologically so he could track his artistic progress. The boy loved the idea and began dedicating regular time to developing his artistic skills. The combination of academic and artistic interests made Ethan a well-rounded, curious child. He maintained good grades in school while still finding time for creative activities and family leisure. Friday nights became a family tradition. They watched movies together, made popcorn, and talked about the week's events. Ethan especially cherished these moments of family intimacy. Dr. Andrew began bringing educational films that would interest Ethan without being boring. They watched documentaries about nature, history, and science, always followed by lively discussions about the topics covered. Ethan also enjoyed age-appropriate adventure movies, but always made sure to discuss the moral lessons and values demonstrated by the characters. His critical thinking skills impressed the adults. Gradually, the family routine settled into a natural and harmonious rhythm. Each family member had their own responsibilities and contributions, creating an environment of cooperation and mutual respect. Ethan took on small, age-appropriate household chores, like keeping his room tidy, helping prepare simple meals, and assisting with minor repairs around the house. He enjoyed feeling useful and helpful. Grandpa Walter remained the primary caregiver, but now he had more regular support from Dr. Andrew and Ethan's growing involvement. The division of responsibilities strengthened family bonds and taught Ethan about teamwork. Dr. Andrew established a schedule that allowed him to balance his professional duties with time dedicated to family. He discovered that having Ethan and Grandpa Walter in his life made him happier and more motivated in every aspect. The emotional stability Ethan had achieved reflected in all areas of his life. His school relationships improved, his confidence grew, and his academic performance remained excellent. Ethan's teachers began using his story as an example for other students, highlighting courage, determination, and the importance of family. The boy felt a little shy about the attention, but understood his experience could inspire other children. The social worker assigned to his case made regular visits to check on Ethan's well-being. She always left impressed by the loving and stable environment the family had created. These visits became pleasant meetings where Ethan shared his school projects, drawings, and discoveries about the farm. She became a kind of outside confidant he could turn to if he needed to talk about something. Ethan's support network continued to grow. Beyond his immediate family, he had caring neighbors, dedicated teachers, school friends, and even professionals who had been involved in his case and stayed in touch. Ethan learned to value these relationships and return the kindness he received. He sent thank you cards to people who had helped him, remembered important birthdays, and always showed genuine gratitude. Gratitude became a defining trait of Ethan's personality. Through his experiences, he had learned that love and support should never be taken for granted, but celebrated and repaid whenever possible. Grandpa Walter was immensely proud of the grandson he had raised. Ethan had grown into a kind, intelligent, brave, and generous young man, qualities that honored his mother's memory and reflected the values the family held dear. Dr. Andrew also felt deep satisfaction seeing how Ethan was thriving. He had kept his promise to his sister to help care for his nephew, and the results exceeded his most optimistic expectations. The family had found the perfect balance between preserving family traditions and embracing new opportunities. Ethan represented the family's continuity, but also the promise of an even brighter future. The inherited land became a symbol of that legacy. Ethan saw the land not just as a valuable property, but as a family legacy that should be preserved and responsibly developed for future generations. The boy began making plans for the property's future, always consulting his grandfather and uncle about his ideas. He wanted to create a project that combined environmental preservation, education, and sustainable income. Ethan's vision for the farm included educational activities for urban children to learn about nature and agriculture. He imagined a place where families could connect with the land and understand the importance of environmental conservation. Dr. Andrew was impressed by the maturity of Ethan's vision and began helping him research similar projects in other regions. They discovered several inspiring initiatives that could serve as models for developing the property. Grandpa Walter contributed practical knowledge about farming and land management. He had learned much about the property over the years and could guide Ethan on the specific characteristics of the soil and local climate. The combination of Grandpa Walter's hands-on knowledge, Dr. Andrew's legal expertise, and Ethan's creativity laid a solid foundation for the property's future development. Each family member brought unique and valuable contributions. Ethan also began taking an interest in broader social issues, especially those related to vulnerable children. He wanted to use his experience to help other kids who might be facing difficult situations. His school organized a project on children's rights, and Ethan stood out as one of the most engaged students. He shared his story in an age-appropriate way with his classmates, inspiring important discussions about family and child protection. The school project caught the attention of other educational institutions in the area. Ethan was invited to participate in events where he could share his experience with larger audiences, always with his family's support and supervision. His presentations were always moving and inspiring. He spoke with simplicity and sincerity about the importance of standing up for what you believe in and how true love can overcome any obstacle. Ethan's communication skills grew significantly through these experiences. He learned to adapt his message for different audiences and convey complex ideas in simple, accessible ways. Dr. Andrew accompanied Ethan in all these activities, offering guidance on handling public attention while always keeping the focus on his nephew's emotional well-being. Grandpa Walter was also proud of Ethan's achievements, but always reminded him of the importance of staying grounded and not letting success change his humble and kind-hearted nature. The family had found the perfect balance between supporting Ethan's public activities and preserving the privacy and normalcy of his childhood. He remained a regular kid who played, studied, and had fun like any other. Weekends at the farm became even more precious to Ethan. It was there that he could just be a child, running through the fields, playing with the animals, and enjoying the freedom nature offered. The property became a refuge where the family could reconnect and relax away from the demands of city life. Ethan learned to appreciate both the hustle of the city and the peace of the countryside. Walks around the property became special moments for conversation between Ethan and his grandfather. Grandpa Walter shared family stories and life lessons, while Ethan listened attentively, absorbing every word with care and affection. Dr. Andrew often joined these walks, creating moments of deep connection among the three men of the family. Ethan felt fortunate to have two such dedicated and caring mentors. During one of these walks, Ethan asked a question that deeply touched both his grandfather and uncle. "Do you think my mom would be proud of me?" The question sparked an emotional conversation about Melissa and how she would certainly be proud of the brave and loving son Ethan had become. Grandpa Walter and Dr. Andrew shared specific memories about Melissa's personality that were reflected in Ethan. Ethan was moved to learn he shared traits with his mother, especially her determination and ability to fight for what she believed in. He felt more connected to her memory and more motivated to honor her legacy. The conversation also reinforced for Ethan that he wasn't alone in the world. He had a family who loved him unconditionally and would always stand by his side no matter what challenges the future might bring. End of story. Now we'd love to hear what you thought of this touching story. Do you believe Ethan made the right decision by revealing all the documents? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other incredible stories that might change your perspective on family and courage.